I'm crazy the way you love me. I'm crazy the way you love me. I'm crazy when you touch me. I'm crazy the way you love me.
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today's an important show because my first guest is going to deliver some information that the world really needs to hear. Will they hear it? I don't know. That's up to you. If you share the show, more people will hear it, and it's important. We're going to be talking with Dr. Stefan Van Vliet about beef and how it really compares to some of these new plant-based meats that everybody is going crazy over. And then later in the show, we're going to be joined by some folks from White Oak Pastures because they are changing the way beef is raised. They actually are producing less carbon emission from raising cattle than people do from raising soybeans. And so we'll talk about that too, because I know there's this tug of war on the heartstrings that, but if I eat beef, I'm destroying the planet. And this is really not true at all. It's propaganda, and it's going to take a long time for people to hear the truth. Before we get started, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods, for making us the tasty pastry, which is the best tasting healthy snack you can imagine. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high quality protein, and 4 to 5 net carbs, and it tastes great. You'll eat it because it tastes great. I promise you, if you have listened to me talk about the tasty pastry and you are yet to try them, here is my offer. Buy a box, and if you don't like them, I will PayPal you cash, and you can ship them to me, and I will eat them. They come in such delicious flavors. Your children will love them, which is a rarity because you send your kid to school with the protein bar, and it'll come back home because they taste like crap. Kids won't eat something just because it's good for them, but you will have to wrestle with them to get the tasty pastries out of their hands. So check them out. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10. Please tell them that Carl sent you. And now, without further delay, you've heard his name before when I've had Dr. Sean Baker on the show. This is Dr. Stefan Van Vliet. Welcome to the show, Dr. Van Vliet.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl.
Thank you. So before we get underway with the discussion about your particular research, there seems to be an open assault on beef today. Do you have any reason to think why this is happening to us today? Because clearly, I want to, before you answer that question, I'm sorry, I want to put this up. This is what average Americans eat day in and day out. Those of you looking at it who are watching live, you see up around 12 o'clock, the percentage of red meat that people eat. Now, if you look over at like 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you see fruits and vegetables by far. And then on the side from 3 o'clock to almost 6 o'clock, dairy. So we are already eating more fruits and vegetables than red meat. We are already consuming more dairy than red meat. In fact, red meat is comparable to chicken when you look at the American diet. So it's not true that we are eating so much beef. Why is there an open assault on beef today, Dr. Van Vliet?
Yeah, that's a good question, Carl. Well, I think you kind of nailed it with your figure already, is that you showed the standard American diet. And the standard American diet is fairly rich in red meat. But what various studies would suggest that when red meat is consumed as part of a quote unquote healthier diet, whether it be a Mediterranean diet or a DASH diet, a bold diet, or any other whole foods based diet, you often see that in the epidemiological studies that these associations of red meat with things like cancer, heart disease, become neutral. So I think part of the issue is that we are consuming a standard American diet, which is rich in red meat, and that is often that's why we think also red meat associates or is bad for us. And then obviously we also have the environmental piece that has now come in because we have a big focus on emissions only, right? That is what we hear all the time: carbon, carbon, carbon. Now there's many things in the environment that we need to be aware of. Going to be water usage, runoff, and things like that, but also potentially carbon sequestration as well, right? It doesn't make any sense if you only look at the emissions part, but not the sequestration part. It's like drawing up a financial report and you only look at your expenses, but not your income.
Interesting.
So in what we see and we were doing systems work in that area, if cattle are well managed, things such as rotational grazing, that yes, there's maybe greater emissions in these grass-fed beef systems, but there's also a greater opportunity for the plants on those pasture to sequester carbon, right? So those are important nuances that we have within this discussion. And well integrated with crop systems, we're doing some work where we have work with integrated crop livestock systems. So what one farm does, it grows produce on a field one year, has ruminant animals on the field a different year, and switches them around the next year. So where the animals actually refertilize the fields again, reducing the needs for pesticides, reducing the needs for fertilizer. Now, those are things that probably the way we used to raise beef. But then after the Green Revolution, right, we had food shortages and we started to move towards this intensive agriculture, towards feedlot systems, growing grain for cattle that are in confinement. And I think that also is part of the reason why there's now this big pushback against beef.
A large amount of soy and corn that is grown as animal feed for CAFOs, for these large feedlot producers. We could probably do away with a lot of that if we went back to the old-fashioned way of raising animals. But the problem with that is that we have large corporations that want to have a large presence in the animal protein space. And they're the ones that we should be mad at, not the family farm, not the Amish guy I buy my raw milk from. That we should be upset with the companies. I remember I was driving from Arizona to California to move my son to San Diego for college. And we went past someplace in between Arizona and California, and you could smell the manure from on the highway. And when you looked off in the distance, you saw what looked like a desert with these huge buildings on them. And so I mentioned this to somebody in San Diego. They says, "Oh, that's a feedlot. They raise pigs and cows there." Oh my God, it was amazing. It must have been miles and miles of buildings, and I can only imagine what the sanitation problem they have there. But when you decentralize that, it's not a problem.
No, I agree, Carl. You make a good point there, and it's a funny story. It reminds me of, I was in North Dakota last week doing field work, and one of the farms that we visited, the farm grew corn next to the feedlot, and then obviously had to grow that corn, use fossil fuel inputs, and then hauled that corn to the animals that were in confinement, and they were fed corn for actually this was 9 months out of their life, because
Right.
they are dairy steers, right? The steers from the dairy industry, they obviously don't produce milk, so they're sold off at a young age, and they raised them and finished them in a feedlot. So they were in a feedlot for 9 months there. And I was just thinking there is that it costs a lot of money nowadays with the inputs, right? Diesel used to be cheap, fertilizer used to be cheap, no longer, to grow the corn and then haul it up to the hill and give it to cattle that are in confinement. Whereas, and I know it is, and it was the sad thing about this, Carl, is what it was a super nice family. It was a family business. The people were super nice, and yeah, you just felt sorry for them, because I was talking to a colleague about this, and I apologize for for the language where they were doing a very messed up thing really well. And they
Right.
perhaps even not even realizing they were just trying to survive, right? And yeah, that is really sad to see. And of course, it's not that easy of just letting the animals out. But you know, we are working with farmers that are interested in using more of these regenerative practices and putting animals back on the land and managing it well. And of course, we have this thing, and you know, everything comes with a price. We also have the land use potential, right? Because if we have more animals on the land, of course, it's going to use more land. But I think one important thing is that we should not sort of, we often as humans try to think of these things in boxes, right? Nature and agriculture are somehow separate entities. And I really think we need to see them as a sort of a combined entity where we can manage this well.
I wrote 2 articles many years ago, one looking at the amount of water it takes to raise a single cow and then the amount of nutrition that single cow produces versus an acre of soybeans. And the reality is it takes more water to grow soybeans, and cows drink water that runs down a hill after a rain. You can't use that. You can't pick that up and put it on the soybean field. So there's a lot of missing pieces to some of these discussions that when you add these missing pieces, you go, oh, wait. The other thing I wrote an article about was, and I can't recall, so I'm going to be a stand to be corrected. But there's like 800 million non-arable acres of land in the United States. That means that, you know, they're on hills and gullies and covered by trees, and you can't grow crops there. But cows can live there. They eat, they graze, they move, they go up the hill, they go down the hill. And this is what land is used for when you can't grow crops on it. You can raise cattle, you can raise goats, you can raise sheep, you can raise all this stuff. Once again, we keep talking about all the land it takes to raise cattle. That land is not used. If we don't use it for raising cattle, it doesn't get used at all.
No, I mean, we could potentially rewild, obviously, things we often hear, but I'm not sure if that's so straightforward either, Carl, because let me tell you, we did this in the Netherlands, my home country. We were like, okay, let's rewild. We rewilded this area, a fairly big area, but of course, you know, humans have appropriated most of the land. So we put wild cattle there, we put deer there, and a few different animals. There were no natural predators there. So the animal population indeed grew there, right? We rewilded it. Then one winter came and there was poor amount of forage and 80% of the animals died. And then there was this big thing. Do we as humans intervene in that and help them, or do we not? In the Netherlands, we were like, the Dutch government was like, well, we said we rewilded it, so we're going to let nature figure it out. But then people were obviously very angry and throwing bales of hay over the fence because the animals were starving. So the point is that, yes, there is a place for rewilding, but there's no reason that we as humans, since we've appropriated all of the land anyway, that we cannot manage this well and try to, you know, integrate human living with agriculture and nature and figure out ways to do that. Of course, there's this interesting study that came out in PNAS, a major journal, and that the authors found that 10,000 years ago we had appropriated as much land as we do today. The problem is the way that we are using the land now and intensification of that. So the idea of sort of disconnecting us from nature and agriculture and urbanization, right, is really feeding into this too. And yeah, I think that's a part of the problem, sort of on this bigger picture discussion level.
About 11 years ago, 12 years ago, I learned about a new type of scientific study called metabolomics, and I was so excited about it. I thought, oh my God, like, when we do studies now, nutritional studies, and we overfeed people a certain food, and then we look at them and then we look and see, you know, what their outcomes are, we only assume that the components of that food are having this effect on that human. But now with metabolomics, I remember talking about metabolomics about 11 years ago. I said, imagine if you shoot a skyrocket up into the air, and it explodes into thousands of beautiful sparkling lights, and you can follow each one of them to see which ones burned the longest, which ones went the furthest, and then you can build these rockets better. You can say, oh, we're going to build them with these components, because those are the ones that went the furthest. Those are the ones that burned the longest. This is what metabolomics is. Metabolomics looks at what the food does in your body after you metabolize it. This is amazing. And I have not seen enough, in my opinion, metabolomic studies done in the past decade. But your study, a metabolomic comparison of plant-based meat and grass-fed meat, indicates large nutritional differences despite comparable nutritional fact panels, which by the way, there's lies in a lot of those. To talk about the metabolomic side of it, how exciting was it to use this technology?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Carl. Yeah, metabolomics, what it does, and especially in this study with the application of food. So foods, right? We see 13 nutrients routinely appearing on nutrition facts panels. We track about another 150 in USDA nutrient reference databases. But foods in their natural state contain hundreds to thousands of compounds that are capable of impacting human nutrition and health. So what we did was we used metabolomics approaches to kind of peel back the onion layer, or took a peek behind the curtain of different foods, in this case, a popular plant-based meat alternative and grass-fed beef. The reason we chose grass-fed beef and the plant-based meat alternative is because they're roughly in the same price category. They're both being marketed as healthier, more sustainable alternatives, right? So we did that as the comparison. They're probably each other's competitors. And we just use these metabolomics approaches that you can use on any biological sample, whether it being, human tissue or plasma, but you can use it on food too. And what we found is that there was a 90% difference in metabolite abundance, basically saying that despite these comparable nutrition facts panels, when you look at the whole food matrix, making meat from a plant versus making meat from an animal, a cow in this case, they are not nutritionally interchangeable, despite what the nutrition facts panels may suggest, which is because there's only a very limited number of nutrients that appear on those nutrition facts panels.
Okay, so first of all, did you discover anything in the meat that you didn't expect to find?
Yes, that was in another study, though. So we did further profiling where we looked at a comparison of grass-fed and grain-fed beef, and we can go into that too. But
yeah,
we saw a lot of differences that I wasn't expecting. And these are not to sidetrack us, but let's sidetrack us a little bit.
No, they won't sidetrack us, but let's talk about it. Go ahead.
Great. Yeah. So we did a follow-up study too, where we compared grain-fed beef with grass-fed beef, and we also did this on bison, and we also did this on milk. But to focus on the beef study, people often think, oh, you have grass-fed and grain-fed beef, right? And there's some difference in the omega-3 fatty acids, but that's about it.
That's it.
Well, we profiled 600 nutrients, and we found, or 600 compounds, I should say, and we found that 380 of those 600 compounds were different between grass-fed and grain-fed beef. Major differences in some of the antioxidants and plant secondary metabolites, which are picked up from the forage. We found difference in vitamins and mineral derivatives. We found difference in certain amino acids. We found difference even in saturated fatty acids. We think saturated fat is bad for us, but there are many different saturated fatty acids. And the longer chain saturated fatty acids, they're actually associated with decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes, and much like the omega-3s, the saturated fatty acids, those long chain ones, which are considered health promoting, those are also enriched in the grass-fed beef. And of course, that makes sense. And another very interesting finding that I did not expect us to find is that advanced glycation end products, that is a main reason why the WHO would consider beef to be a carcinogen, right?
Mm-hmm.
These advanced glycation end products are produced from glucose. So if the animal has glucose metabolic dysfunction, has more glucose in the system, in the muscle, you start producing more of those advanced glycation end products. And when we saw those to be higher in the grain-fed beef, a light bulb went up in my head too. And it's like, oh, that makes total sense, because if we look at the glucose metabolism of the grain-fed animal, they start to show impairments, glucose dysfunction, not unlike a human. And then to further top it off, and this I hadn't thought about either, an aha moment, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, right? Sort of the essence of life. The mitochondrial metabolites in the grass-fed beef in the muscle, those were further upregulated too. So to use a human analogy, the grass-fed animals, because they move around more, they kind of look more like an endurance-trained athlete. Analysis on human muscle too. In my lab, we take muscle out of a human a little bit and study their metabolism. And sort of the grass-fed animals kind of showed like this endurance-trained, healthy phenotype. And the grain-fed animals, they start to show, I wouldn't want to say they were unhealthy per se, but as compared to the grass-fed animals, they definitely showed some metabolic impairments.
Okay, now stay with this for a second, because what I've been saying on this show for about the past 5 years is that those of us who eat Wagyu, I don't eat Wagyu. If I'm buying a piece of beef, I don't want a piece of fat. But those of us who go to the restaurant and want a piece of Wagyu beef, we're actually buying a metabolically deranged animal meat, because we see this in people with type 2 diabetes, fat storage in the muscle, fat storage in the liver, fat storage in the viscera. These cows are sick and they're being prized. So, but if I can steal what you just said and overlay it, that means that there's more AGEs that are going to be produced from Wagyu beef, because these are completely metabolically deranged. They're probably almost equivalent to diabetic animals. So when you talk about glucose causing a greater degree of AGE accumulation, and we're eating that, we shouldn't be eating Wagyu beef at all. And I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off, and I'm sorry, but am I far-reaching with this?
No, I think you bring up a point. You bring up an important point, Carl. And I do want to preface this by saying is that as compared to the grass-fed beef, the grain-fed animals look unhealthier. But at the moment I don't have a feel for if they are truly sick or anything. Animals don't develop diabetes. One of the things I think we should do is we should use some tissue from humans that we know have metabolic disease and compare that to the grain-fed animals to get a feel of where they are, to compare across mammalian species. But okay. And I also want to say this. I think the reason why we have metabolic disease in the US is not because we're eating grain-fed beef. It's because we're eating a poor standard American diet.
Yes.
And various studies suggest that eating grain-fed beef as part of a healthy diet is completely compatible with good health. But it doesn't mean if we want to optimize our health that we can get some benefits from eating animals that were raised very well. Okay, so that was my disclaimer. But to go further into this is that I do think you have a point, and that is sort of the next step of our studies is that, okay, what is the relationship between animal health and nutrient density in that meat? On paper, I'd say yes, grass-fed meat from well-managed animals looks healthier on paper. Does it have an appreciable health effect on humans? That is sort of the open question.
Yeah. And the reason that's hard to assess is because something you and I talked about before the show. And that is that humans can survive and subsist on just about any diet. That is why we are at the top of the food chain. If we had to eat grubs to save our lives, we could do it. And so, there's this discussion about surviving and thriving. But the reality is it's really hard to see the damage done by a diet unless it's over 40 or 50 years. Where, this constant drip of nutrient deficiencies starts to show. And that's why it's very hard when we talk about these things to say, oh, well, when you eat grass-fed, yeah, some people can get by with grain-fed beef. And it also depends on how much grain-fed beef they're eating. It also depends on what they're eating it with. That's complementary or antagonistic. Chrissy Fox is asking, if you could provide if you have the study for the grain-fed glucose levels, would you send that to me, and then I'll post it on my Facebook wall? Okay?
I could probably post a little abstract or a preprint, but currently it's under review. So
okay, yeah, anything that you can send. But Chrissy, this makes perfect sense. So even look, almost all cows, except the ones in CAFOs. And some would argue the ones in CAFOs have been sent there for processing. It's only about the 6 or 8 months before they're slaughtered that they must eat corn. And that is they will put a pound a day on if they're eating corn. And the reason for that is the same reason that somebody who just eats nothing but sugar and glucose promoting foods puts weight on very rapidly. So it's this is not a surprising statement to say that cows that are fed corn appear what we would call to be metabolically deranged, or the onset of metabolic derangement, which is fat infiltrating the muscles. And that's what we see. We want grainy beef. Well, a grainy piece of beef just means there's some fat marbling in there. There's marbling in there that's fat, and it adds to the flavor and the palatability of it. So it's not challenging to me to make that conclusion. But what is startling to me is that may affect the amount of advanced glycation end products that you are consuming.
Yeah, that was startling to me too, Carl, because in retrospect, it of course makes total sense, but it's usually the case in retrospect with research or anything, right? That it was like, of course, if you have more glucose in the system, and these are produced from glucose, then yeah, it makes sense you have higher amounts of these. And I do want to highlight, Carl, also, and it's never black and white, right? Is that the idea of using byproducts, grain byproducts, to upcycle this into an animal? That idea itself is very good. I was driving through Nebraska last year, and we were on a road trip. We moved to Utah, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see so many cattle grazing corn stalks, so harvested corn or harvested wheat fields. Right. And they were grazing that. It was a great way of upcycling that. And they were doing so on free choice, right? For a small period of time, winter feeding. Another thing that we are studying too, and this is very interesting, is that can you kind of get the best of both worlds? What if you have free choice access to some corn on pasture or some other byproducts, right? That the animal can eat, it can self-regulate, but it can also consume grass. So you can get this weight on, you can get the animal has some benefits from that. But what we always do as humans, we take something that can be good, and then we take it to the extreme, and then it becomes bad.
We've done this as humans 40,000 years ago when we started to use agriculture so we wouldn't starve. We did monocrop. We grew one thing, and that we ate that day in and day out, week in and week out. That's when we started getting cavities. That's when we started having ailments. So we do this to ourselves as well. I also want to mention something else. Corn stalks are considered grass. It's considered silage or silage, however you want to say it. So the reality is that corn is a flower, if you will, on the end of the corn stalk, but corn stalks are grass, and cows will eat those stalks if they're allowed to go into those fields, especially once it's been harvested and they're dried out, and they're, and they will go and eat that stuff. So that doesn't.
Yeah, and even other byproducts, Carl. I think that there's a role for that too, and it can be a good way of relieving some of the stress on pastures and having some winter feeding. And I do want to highlight, we did a very interesting study with bison too. So we took a study, and this was a bison herd on one of the Turner ranches in Nebraska. The animals were raised on pasture. Some of the bison were finished on the rangeland, and then for the last 150 days, some bison went into a pen. The pen was 4 times as big as the average cattle have in a feedlot. Because if you do that to bison, they'll go insane because they are semi-wild animals, right?
And they're strong enough to knock everything down and run away.
That's true too, yeah. And amongst the males, they might also get into a fight with each other. But anyway, they had free choice. They had free choice access to corn, to hay, and to alfalfa. And while we still saw difference metabolically and in the nutrient density between the rangeland finished bison and the pen finished bison, the difference was much less dramatic than we see sometimes in more of like a stricter total mixed ration feedlot, where already animals are consuming a lot of corn. To give you this example, I think most listeners know about the omega-6 to 3 ratio, which is a good indicator of the nutrient density of that beef or that meat. In the bison that were finished on pasture, we had a omega-6 to 3 ratio of 1.8 to 1. So quite a lot of omega-3s. Right. But then in the pen finished animals, it still was 3 to 1, and which is still a very favorable.
It's not terrible. Yeah.
No, it's not terrible at all. It's a good ratio of 3 to 1, because if you look at the feedlot, it typically is like 15 to 1 or so. And if you look at the literature on grass-fed beef, a lot of them are 3-to-1, 4-to-1. So again, it's not black and white. There may be a place for some finishing, but there is, a middle ground to be found in that, I think. And I think that's where eventually, with this sort of idea of more sustainable agriculture, hopefully that's kind of where we land.
I want to just put this is kind of a non sequitur, but Chris Fox made a post. It's hard to convince the just eat meat who care about their diet. The cheaper, the better. There's another crowd, the cheaper, the better. They don't understand you are what you eat. And we've taken you are what you eat to an extreme, number one. And I don't want to, that could be another show. But what I want to say to you, Chris, is the one word in your comment, convince. Why do you want to convince anyone of anything? Convincing somebody, it's almost always to reinforce your choice. If I can convince you of this, then I feel better about my choice. I don't want to curse, but F them. You don't have to convince anybody of anything. Take the information. Be a critical thinker. Does it make sense to you? Then follow it. And if don't try to convince these other people, because that's the problem today. If your diet requires a membership card and has an annual cruise, you're eating that way for the wrong reason. And the reality is that diet is very individual. If you can go back thousands and thousands of years to where your ancestors originated, what they thrived on, what grew naturally, what occurred naturally, you can probably find some of the assets to your appropriate diet. But don't try to convince anybody, Chris. If this makes sense to you, if grass-fed beef makes more sense to you, you eat it and you feel good about eating it. And don't worry about the cheaper diet people that are going, well, I can just, good, eat what you want. That's the bottom line. But use your brain and choose properly. We're going to take one quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more. This is going to get very interesting because now we're going to talk about the comparison to these plant-based meat alternatives and real grass-fed beef. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. If you've listened to Superhuman Radio for any length of time, you know I'm a big proponent of peptides. One of my favorites is GHKCU, the blue copper peptide. It has the ability to repair and regenerate more youthful expressions of skin cells, reversing the signs of aging. Restore Cell's Stem Cell Awakening Serum, along with their other products, contain potent formulations of blue copper peptide and only the highest quality organic ingredients. Superhuman Radio listeners can now save 25% site-wide. Buy their complete set and receive a free exfoliating cleanser. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use the code SHR25. That's SHR25. Remodel your skin today.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Stefan Van Vliet. We're talking about a comparison to what is all the rage right now, vegetable-based meat alternatives and genuine, natural, grass-fed beef. So let's start with the beef. Where did the grass-fed beef win over the plant-based?
Yeah, I don't know if we could say win, Carl. What I can say is that the products are so vastly different that grass-fed meat and a plant-based meat alternative are not nutritionally interchangeable, despite what some of the marketing may suggest.
Yeah, and that's their whole premise. Their whole premise is, hey, this is just as good as meat.
Yeah, based on maybe a limited number of isolated compounds. But so the thing, though, is we cannot really determine from our work which one is healthier. And it's also kind of beyond the point to an extent. But just to get into that is that, we found potentially beneficial compounds in the meat, such as taurine, anserine, creatine, hydroxyproline, and numerous of these carnosine, numerous compounds that play an important role for muscle health, for brain health. Taurine plays a role in almost any cell of the body. Eye health, kidney health, liver health, you name it.
Wasn't there also was it nicotinamide or niacinamide that was found in real beef and not in the fake meat?
Yeah, that's right. So
the only reason I raise this is because NAD+ is all the rage, and that's a precursor to NAD+.
Yeah, that's right. So we found sort of the more natural form of vitamin B3 in the meat, and then the fortified form was a synthetic form that's not common to our in the past was not common to our diet, I should say. So it was a different form of vitamin B3. We can still get the supplemental form and convert it, but the question is what, and it may have some distinct benefits too, but yes, there was a different form of vitamin B3 in there. But then also, if we looked at the plant-based burger, which was soy-based, the popular soy-based alternative, we found things like, certain phenolic compounds, potentially soy isoflavones that have been ascribed with some health benefits, and other compounds too that could potentially be beneficial. There was also a lot of coconut oil based, which some of these fatty acids can have sort of antimicrobial activity. So the point is that we found some beneficial compounds in both of them, but they were very much different. So, and that is the point of sort of the main thing that we found. And of course, I mean, there have been randomized controlled trials that would suggest that eating plant-based meat alternatives is compatible with good health. Like the swap meat trial, for instance, found that. There's a study out of the UK that found that the gut microbiome could be beneficially impacted by eating plant-based meat alternatives. So it's not to say that they are unhealthy. Our study doesn't suggest it. Other work won't suggest it. But this idea of saying like, hey, we can just eat meat from plants and get the same nutrients, yeah, that is not the case. And
how is this any different than having a steak with paired with a couple vegetables? You know what I mean? This is, look, we know the Mediterranean diet is not necessarily heavy in beef. It's heavier in chicken and fish and plants. And everybody does well with it. We know that people do well that eat, a steak with some broccoli and maybe some other green vegetable. So all really this plant-based meat product is really for a very, very small niche of the population. It's no wonder the products are failing. They are failing, by the way. And I'm not happy about that. I'm a businessman. I never want to see any business fail. But they're not doing what they thought they were going to do. And here's why. Because I don't mind eating meat. Now, if I was a vegan and I won't eat, maybe I'm a what do they call them when I feel bad for animals, so I don't want to eat meat. But I do miss a hamburger once in a while. Then this product is for me because I can fool myself and say, oh, I'm eating a hamburger, but I'm not. But the reality is that's the niche that this product is going to appeal to, and that's a very, very small portion of the population. The rest of us will have, hey, give me my steak, give me some broccoli, give me some asparagus. I'll eat them all together. The same impact as eating the meat burger. I mean, the plant burger, right? Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right. You're right, Carl. And I think that's indeed, it's a very small portion of the population, because if you are health conscious and you're on a vegan diet, you're likely going to eat more whole foods based, right? You're going to eat legumes, you're going to eat beans and things like that, right? And so you're kind of maybe not catering to that part of the population. Also, the price point is the same as well-managed grass-fed beef. So then probably the folks are going to, eat an actual piece of meat. And I agree with that. I mean, I myself enjoy eating, especially the Don Lee Farm black bean burgers. I think those are great products.
Yeah.
And why do I like them? Because they don't taste like beef.
Right. Exactly. And that is the key that they missed. So again, let's talk about stearic acid for just a second. I had a guy come on my show a couple years ago, and he talked about how stearic acid increases mitochondrial uncoupling, helps you burn fat. He had all these great studies he talked about. And that's, I think it was stearic acid, is really actually good for you. But it's the waxy, hard fat that most of us want to trim off of the beef and not eat. Is there any value to stearic acid in real beef?
Yeah, so stearic acid is indeed the predominant fatty acid in beef. And I'm not as quite well read up on the literature on mitochondrial coupling of stearic acid, but what I do know is that stearic acid is typically neutral on its effects on lipoprotein profiles, things like cholesterol, triglycerides, and then epidemiological studies would suggest that the intake of stearic acid with cardiovascular disease is oftentimes neutral. So the main fatty acid found in beef is oftentimes neutral as it comes to health. And the other thing, Carl, is that and sort of what we found in the grass-fed beef is that stearic acid, you have longer chain saturated fatty acids like behanic acid, or you have others like that too. That nonodecanoic acid is another one. So they have more so these saturated fatty acids, longer chain saturated fatty acids, and these are actually becoming enriched in the beef, and those are associated with a decreased risk of cardiometabolic disease. So that's another point that we found in the grass-fed beef too, is that these fatty acids were enriched. And then in the plant-based meat alternative, this was based on sunflower oil and coconut oil were the two main ingredients. So they also had lower amounts of these very long-chain saturated fatty acids. So that was another difference that we found in those products.
Is there taurine added to the plant-based meat products?
No, at the moment not. I wouldn't rule it out in the future, but probably if taurine was on the nutrition facts panel, then yes, but it isn't.
So a funny phenomenon happened when years and years ago, when I actually did one of my first shows 11 years ago on feeding your dog raw meat. If you don't cook a piece of chicken, it won't get stuck in your dog's throat. Nobody is going out into the woods and pulling chicken bones out of wolves' throats. Wonder why? Because it's raw. But we did a show with Dr. Peter Rouse, and we started to tell people, feed your dog raw meat. Of course, the same quality meat that you would eat yourself. And because a lot of the new anti-grain dog foods that were coming out were causing heart attacks in dogs, because when they took the wheat out of the dog food, they took the taurine out of the dog food. And so these dogs were eating a diet exclusively devoid of taurine, and they were developing heart problems. Taurine is very, very important to the heart and naturally occurring in meat. So they really should. I mean, if anybody's listening from the plant-based side, learn what we learned about dog food a decade ago and add taurine to your product. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree, Carl. Taurine is so important, and it's found in very low amounts in some legumes, but presumably too low to make a substantial impact. So yeah, if I was on a vegan diet, I would absolutely supplement, most likely supplement with things like taurine and creatine, and there's probably some other compounds too. The issue though is that and we also have to be careful, because we know that you can live. Some people can live very healthy and seem to thrive on vegan diets. Other people may not do so well on it, and I don't think that the people that don't do so well on it is just because they didn't do the diet right. There's probably some genetic differences too. So we always must, stay away from one diet fits all approaches. But yes, I do think that's important, and also to add to that of raw meat versus cooked meat for animals, right? I always say like this: if my cat or my dog can figure out how to cook its meat, then they probably are it's safe for them to eat. But if they can't figure out how to cook it themselves, then maybe that's a sign that we should. Cook meat.
We even did a show. People like to say that milk is inappropriate for humans to drink, and we're the only ones on the planet that drink milk. But that's a lie. Animals drink milk when they have the opportunity to. But anyway, Sean Wasson raises a point, but I don't think this is within your purview. We're learning now that autoimmune disorders seem to be triggered by plant-based anti-nutrients, for lack of better terms, right? A plant can't run, it can't fight, it can't bite, so it evolves to develop anti-nutrients to keep other things from eating it. I went to a lecture many years ago where it was proposed that the phytoestrogens in soy are exactly that. The animals that ate a lot of it, it threw their mating cycles off. They didn't have offspring, and they were gone off the planet, and the soy won. What about the did you look for things in these both products that shouldn't be there, like glyphosate, like anti-nutrients, like any of that stuff?
Not per se in this analysis, Carl. We didn't look at per se anti-nutrients. Of course, we are detecting some things, and some of the things that we found were more like potassium sorbate or something like a preservative, but we didn't per se look at some of the anti-nutrients or toxins per se. But to add to that, and I think just sort of in the bigger picture, why this may be an issue now is that we've been eating plants for a long period of time. We've been eating beans for a long period of time, and things like corn, but we used to process these in a proper way to get rid of a lot of those anti-nutrients and toxins, right? We would metabolize our corn, we would soak and sprout and pound our beans and things like that. But nowadays, humans have sort of forgotten about it, and we take the shortcuts to these things. And I think that's also why we're seeing some of these issues. And but we didn't look at pesticides or things like that in these particular analysis.
And that's a really good point. We used to prepare food. Today, people don't even want to take the time to cook their food. But we used to ferment food with the anticipation of eating it next week. And people don't even look that far out. But for those of you who are interested in fermentation, next week we're going to have Donna Gates on the show, and she's going to teach you how to make kefir. And you don't have to use milk to make kefir. She's going to show you how to make kefir from almond milk, from coconut water, from anything you want. You can actually make kefir. It doesn't have to be made from milk. So we're gonna try to help the audience, those who want to put the effort in to start preparing their foods differently. We're going to give you some how-tos next week. So hopefully you'll tune in for that. We're going to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, we'll finish up this discussion. We'll make sure we didn't miss anything that we need to talk about in this study. And then at the top of the hour, Wes Ruff is going to join us from White Oak Pastures. I love White Oak Pastures because, well, he's going to tell you the story better than I can. But what they are doing is what you're talking about. Regenerative farming, rotating crops, moving animals. And they not only produce the best animal protein in the world, but you can feel good about eating it if you're one of these people who really believes that if we don't do things quickly, the climate change is going to take us So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. The Hercules Pre-Workout from Lost Empire Herbs is like no pre-workout you have ever had before. Completely natural formula designed specifically to optimize workouts, provide quicker recovery time, provide adequate nutrition, and get you away from all those no-good, overstimulating pre-workout supplements on the market today. The Hercules Pre-Workout blend is a mix of extracted natural herbs and mineral pitch. No fake colors, no added flavors, nothing else. Not only will Hercules Pre-Workout formula help your workouts, but you'll likely discover lots and lots of side effects, beneficial side effects. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Lost Empire today to learn more.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
How often do you wake up in the morning and instantly wish you had just another hour of sleep? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep, or you have brain fog. Your energy is low, or you just can't concentrate. You run for coffee or an energy drink, but that barely moves the needle. Imagine having control over how you feel and being able to just flip a switch and turn on your brain within 10 minutes of waking up without coffee or caffeine. I've personally experienced this over the past few months since trying Nutopia. Nutopia is the most advanced brain support and cognitive enhancement system that I've ever tried. It's like a chemistry set for your brain. Nutopia specializes in personalized brain supplements, also known as nootropics. Nutopia has raised the bar on the nootropic category beyond anything that exists today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Nutopia. That's NOOTOPIA and enter the code SHR10 for an additional 10% off. You will not be disappointed in this product. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. Are you 35 or older? Every year after puberty, your growth hormone decreases sometimes by 50% by the age of 35, and it only keeps going down from there. This affects everything from making it harder to recover from workouts, sleep, and a general loss of a sense of well-being. It also affects your ability to get and stay lean. BioPro Plus is the first of its kind, 100% non-synthetic alternative to prescription synthetic growth hormone treatments. All the benefits without any of the needles or side effects, and 100% safe. Previously only available through doctors, you can go to shrnetwork.biz/biopro, that's BIOPRO, and use code SHR30 for $30 off today.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Hey, welcome back. So here's something else that you won't find in grass-fed beef. The Beyond Meat brand of plant-based burger was recalled due to pieces of wood being in it. This is from April. I'm just putting this up because, it's important to understand that Beyond Burgers and all these plant-based products are just processed foods. We talk about how get away from processed foods. But these are just processed foods. They're man-made. They have a list of ingredients on the side of the box, and sometimes there's things in there. I know that they probably put cellulose in it, and that's probably how this wood ended up in there, because they want to add some fiber, because the thought is that there's no fiber in beef. But you discovered polyphenols in beef, did you not?
Yeah, that's right. So particularly in grass-fed beef, and in retrospect, it kind of makes sense. If the animal is consuming very diverse and phytochemically rich forage, right, on pasture, we see a incorporation of these phytochemicals in the meat. Now, when the animal is grazing a monoculture pasture or is overgrazing it, then we see a reduced amounts of these phytochemicals. And then in grain-fed beef, you see a further reduction of these phytochemicals. So the statement "you are what you eat" is to an extent true. And so that's why when someone always tells me, well, Stefan, there's no real nutritional differences between meat from either grain-fed systems or grass-fed systems, then I always say, it's like, well, if we as a human consume the Mediterranean diet or a standard American diet, right? We'd expect very different nutritional profiles and metabolic differences within the human. Why do we not expect that for the animal?
You know, it's really funny. I did a show 4 or 5 years ago. The sun does not cause skin cancer. And I took people through a process. I say the sun is an unwilling partner in the growth of skin cancer, and your diet is linked to skin cancer. And people think I'm crazy. I've had dermatologists tell me I was crazy, and then I would say, if I take retinol, real vitamin A, active vitamin A, it makes it into my skin, and it protects me against skin cancer. There's well done studies that show that the sun depletes retinol, but when you supplement or you have a diet high in retinol, you don't get skin cancer. And also things like astaxanthin and other antioxidants have all been shown to protect against skin cancer. So through deductive reasoning, I say, okay, so let me ask you a question, Doc. Not you, the dermatologist. Mm-hmm. If there are things that I can put in my mouth, they go through my stomach and into my blood and out into my skin that will protect me against skin cancer, then why is it such a stretch to think there's things that I can put in my mouth that go down to my stomach and out into my skin that will trigger skin cancer when exposed to sun? They're photoactivated, and then they're speechless. And so I've said this on the show for years. I had somebody email me one day and said he's had skin cancer removed from his stomach 3 times now. His stomach has never been exposed to the sun. He wears a shirt all the time. How is the sun causing that skin cancer? And I said, and I repeat back what I said. The reason I say this is because everything those cows eat is distributed into every cell of their body. So if they're eating, if one day they graze into the onion patch, and I know because I've tasted the milk, and they eat the onions, they're going to get the things that are in the onions. It's going to be in their skin. You're going to eat it. Is this not fact?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right, Carl. It's an interesting story. Is that the French were way ahead of this than we are. We started to do this work in North American ruminant systems, but the golden rule in science is if you can think of it, someone has thought about it well before you did. The French have studied these phytochemicals in their cheeses, and they were very well aware if we graze this pasture or if we grow like an alpine region or a Pyrenean region, right? We get these phytochemicals into the milk, and then the cheese will taste like this. So they were very well aware of it. But then when I looked at this data at several years ago, I was looking at these and I was like, wait a minute, looking at it from a lens of human nutrition scientists, I'm thinking like, well, yes, these are flavor compounds, these phytochemicals, but they also have these and these and these health benefits. So it's also the link of flavor with health. But the point is that if an animal consumes certain types of forages, then yes, you get this terroir, right? Is what it's called, this unique flavor in there. And that's oftentimes what you can also taste with wild game. If you have deer that
yes,
sagebrush, right? It's chock full of terpenes, and you get this flavor already that some people think is off-putting, but it's kind of like marinating the meat from the inside out almost.
Yes, the deer, when they eat nothing but acorns, they taste sweet. And the same thing is true of wild turkeys, because they will eat acorns when the acorns are fallen. The meat tastes different. And any hunter knows this. Every hunter knows this. And for some reason, again, because I think that we've lost our ability to think critically, people don't think about this. Did we miss anything? Was there anything in this study that we need to discuss right now to make sure that people understand? Because what I'm getting from this study, and this is why I'm not popular, It's because there's nothing extreme here. You can survive on the plant-based meat burgers. You can survive on real meat burgers, and maybe you should combine them once in a while because it's just like having veggies with your hamburger. I know this. No one's going to be excited about that.
No, you're right, Carl. I sometimes jokingly say if you go to a fast food outlet, which you probably shouldn't eat anyway, but okay, if you're going to do it and I'm going to eat a double patty, then maybe order one of the Beyond Beef and one beef burger. You get the best of both worlds. But now I'm obviously joking, but I think, it's the study, there was nothing truly spectacular about it. It was kind of like, kicking an open door maybe a little bit, but okay, sometimes it's worthwhile to kick in an open door. Beef and plant-based meat alternatives are not one-to-one nutritionally interchangeable. That was it. Don't know if one is healthier or the other. It also maybe is a little bit beyond the point. You just get very much different nutrients. But the important part of that, though, is, Carl, is that this is for the consumer important to realize. And one thing we don't know, what happens if you, and even maybe multi-generation, what if you do not consume any taurine throughout your life, right? And I don't think it matters as much throughout adulthood, maybe, I don't know. But we know that these can be conditionally essential. And so these are important things to note, is that, you have very much different nutritional profiles. And that is sort of the main takeaway of that study.
My opinion of the whole thing is, if you want to eat beef, but your dietary commitment to your religion or whatever preclude you from eating beef, then this is a good alternative. But don't be afraid of beef, and don't be afraid of what beef is doing to the planet, because we're going to discuss that next.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope you'll come back as soon as you have more research to talk about.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure, Carl. We have a big study now on beef from different production systems, farms all across the U.S., so this will be probably the largest database that links these things like soil health, plant diversity, animal health, and then human health, and then looking at these various production systems and see how they compare to each other. Do more sustainable production practices also beneficially impact the nutrient density and human health? And that is sort of the main question or hypothesis that we're posing within that study.
Makes perfect sense. And also, will you remember to send me whatever excerpts you can about the glucose AGE study?
Absolutely. I will send a PDF of that along.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great weekend. Take care. We're going to take one quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Wes Ruff, and we're going to talk about my favorite place to get animal protein and all animal protein: chicken, pork. By the way, I'm a big fan of pork. I actually think pork is better to eat than beef because it's more similar to human flesh. I know, I'm a cannibal. But anyway, we're going to talk about how you can actually raise animals, produce great protein for people, and actually contribute to the quality of the environment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow. When you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. Are you suffering from signs of an unhappy gut? Diversity is the key to healthy, robust inner ecosystem. Body Ecology probiotic liquids are made by fermenting organic seeds, biodynamic brown rice, and chickpeas together to create a diverse culture found nowhere else on Earth. It's the secret to restoring your gut's microbiome for a healthier digestive tract, improved immune function, and longevity. Take 20% off by visiting the website shrnetwork.biz/bodyeco. shrnetwork.biz/bodyeco. That's BODYECO. And using the code SHR20.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Hey, welcome back to Superhuman Radio, and we're joined by Wes Ruff from my favorite place to get animal protein, and that's White Oak Pastures. How you doing, Wes?
I'm good, Carl. How are you?
Good. So for the people who don't know anything about, I mean, we've had you, we've had Jenny, we've had Will on the show numerous times now. Our audience has responded. We have a lot of people in the audience that buy their animal protein. By the way, with what's going on at the supermarket today, this is where you want to buy your animal protein because it shows up at your doorstep. And I'm going to tell you something. I did business with other companies that are really popular on Instagram and stuff like that, and the meat arrived thawed out. Now, granted, I snapped the shot. I sent it to them. They replaced it. But who wants to be bothered with that? Because you got to be there to bring it into the house, and it's a pain in the ass. Everything arrives on time, and everything arrives so frozen from White Oak Pastures that it hurts my hands to unpack the boxes. And that's a true story. And I have 2 deep freezers, and we load them up. But I mean, everything arrives on time, completely rock hard frozen, and you put it away and you eat it when you want. I've become a huge fan of the Iberico pork. I've become a huge fan of the sweet Italian sauce, the mild Italian sausages, the country sausages. I love them. I'm probably going to have those tonight with my dinner. And by the way, your sirloin steak is by far the tastiest, most tender sirloin steak I've ever eaten. And I eat steak out in restaurants and stuff like that. When you buy the ribeye, the fat is yellow because of what we were just talking about with the doctor. These cows are eating grass. They're getting all those carotenoids concentrated in their fat. It looks like butter instead of fat. You know, when you buy a steak at the grocery store, if they didn't rub that pink slime on it, the fat is as white as chalk.
Right.
But the fat from White Oak Pastures is yellow like butter. You gotta take. So let's talk about how you do things at White Oak Pastures so that people who think, you know, I want to keep eating beef, but I don't want to destroy the planet, they can do business with White Oak Pastures. Explain about the carbon footprint and all the research and all the work that you guys do.
Sure. Happy to do it. So basically, back in 1995, Will Harris was he is the owner of White Oak Pastures. It's a 6th generation farm established in 1866. Back in 1995, up to that point, Will had been more of a conventional monocultural farmer, but he was having a hard time watching his animals get shipped off to some, far away processing plant. He knew it was stressing the animals. He knew it wasn't good for them. He had questions about the land, the biome under the soil, questions about everything and about the way he was currently farming at that time. So he made a series of radical changes. He decided to go back to farming the way we did it 150 years ago, to manage the herds properly, to do managed grazing methodologies out in the fields, which keeps the parasites down. And so over time, what we've done at White Oak Pastures is we're primarily known for grass-fed beef, but we're becoming increasingly known for other other ruminants that we have on the farm, other grazing animals. We've started raising animals on the farm that complement one another when it comes to the cycles of nature. An example of that would be that if you have beef running through one pasture one day, well, there may be a parasite in the grass that won't bother the cow, but it's going to bother the sheep. And so we send the cattle through, and it eats the grass with the sheep parasite on it to no ill effect on the cow. The next day, we can send the sheep through the same field looking for the grass that might have a parasite related to cattle that cattle don't like, and the sheep clean that one out to no ill effect to themselves. The long-term net result is you've got the animals keeping the land clean, and as a result of that, they're also keeping each other healthy, which eliminates the need for antibiotics. We're basically working with the cycles of nature as the maker of nature intended. And going back and discovering those cycles and working in symbiotic partnership with them is what allows us to raise animals in a way that they instinctively practice natural behaviors for foraging, for shelter, for everything that would come naturally to an animal. They can do freely, and we can create a stress-free environment for them because they're doing what is natural to them. There's no surprise for these animals. They kind of know what's coming, and they get to do what they were made to do. It goes a long way in both flavor and health. It's good for the land. You know, it's amazing. We're not scientists, but we have a study done on the carbon footprint on our soil. And we find that because of the way we're raising our animals and managing the land, that carbon is being safely sequestered and stored in the soil by the ton, as opposed to being released up into the atmosphere, which is what you get through monocultural linear farming. Every time you got to send a combine out into the field to turn the topsoil and then start applying chemicals to get the ground to grow again, you're losing carbon. It's going into the upper atmosphere and impacting the overall temperature of the planet.
Well, now, I may misstate this, but I remember the study because we had Will on the show several months ago to talk about it. And that study showed that the way you raise cattle by the acre produces a negative carbon footprint compared to growing soy on that acre, which produces a positive carbon footprint.
Right.
So, I mean, now, wait a minute. I don't want to just gloss over this.
Sure.
We have all these anti-beef people telling us that raising cattle is destroying the planet, but it's not. Now, granted, the CAFO with 50,000 head, stuck in a building somewhere, that's a different story. We're not talking about that. None of us agree that that's good. Not the people on the anti-beef side and not any of the people on the beef side. But you now have a place to buy animal protein that is hurting the planet less than the place you buy your kale or your tofu or your other produce. Think about that for a second. Let that set into your brain. You're actually helping the planet by buying products from Wes at White Oak Pastures, because
it's true.
Now, another important point to make here is, as you said, this is the way we did it hundreds of years ago, isn't it? This is not a mystery. But let's be honest. Companies like Dow and all these other companies couldn't sell you chemicals to those people back then because they didn't need them.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, nowadays, they tell you need. And I remember I wrote about a study that showed that genetically modified soy produces no additional profit for the farmer who grows the soy, because while there may be a few extra bushels an acre produced, when you add back in the cost of these petrochemical-based pesticides and herbicides that you have to spray, it's more expensive to grow GMO. It's not less expensive. So that means the consumer pays more for it.
Right.
The farmer pays more for it. And the planet pays more for it, because one of the things that's never, ever discussed conveniently when they talk about all this carbon footprint and destroying the planet is the hundreds of millions of tons of petrochemical-based pesticides and herbicides that is sprayed during growing season. Where do you think that stuff goes? It goes up into the air. But they convenient. I had a scientist on from the great land grant University of Washington State, And they showed unequivocally that was having a greater burden on our atmosphere than anything else we were doing down here on the planet, even gas, even fossil fuel. But you've never heard that before. Why? Because the mainstream media doesn't talk about that, because they're not pissing off their biggest advertisers, Dow and all these other companies. So don't be fooled by this rush to, meatless Mondays help the planet. BS. It's not helping. It's BS. They think you're a fool, and they can tell you anything and get you to follow. And sadly, a lot of the population do.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think there's something else to bring out of that the way we have our food system currently set up, it's anywhere from 4 to 6 monolithic corporations that are controlling what's in our grocery stores. Personally, I'm not that comfortable with that. That's a lot of power to people that I don't know. What we do know is that when you eat protein that's closer to the landscape, where people have sweat equity, and there's like a vibrant community around our agricultural farms, our centers of agriculture in this country. You bring the farms back to our communities, teach our kids about the value of learning how nature works. Let's start using technology subordinated to nature instead of overcoming nature. Let's remember that nature was put in place by a mind much greater than our own. Maybe we ought to be learning something here. And what we're discovering at White Oak Pastures is we use technology. We use everything we can to advance the business and the messaging. But what we really want at the end of the day is to see life spread. What you're looking for is life in our communities. We're looking for life in our families. We want our animals, since they're making the ultimate sacrifice, we've got to know that, ethically speaking, we've done everything we possibly can to make sure they had the best life while they were here, and that we honor the sacrifice of the animals we have on our farm moving forward. When it concerns things like the way that our country has been dealing with meat and various proteins for a long time, I think we're looking at a time where it's important for us to start getting back to the basics of living and the way we used to do things, and finding that you can get an animal and raise it well, and the animal can have a happy life. And then when the animal passes, that you can use that protein to advance not only your life, but the life of your community. Well, that's a good thing. It's very symbiotic, and it works.
I got to mention something. See my wallet? White Oak. Okay. In my media room, I have a cowhide on the floor from White Oak Pastures. They use every single piece and part of the animal. Everything. They even have dog food for people who want to buy meat-based dog foods for their pets. They use everything, bone marrow, everything. But more importantly, let me tell you another story. You guys are in Bluffton, Georgia. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Talk about the town of Bluffton, Georgia, before White Oak Pastures turned around into this type of farming style, and now after.
Absolutely. The way Will Harris likes to put it is, when our food industry was commoditized, centralized, and industrialized, we started destroying the agricultural towns around the nation. It's very, very true. People started moving to the cities. Bluffton was no exception. For the longest time, Bluffton was a small town in the lower southwestern corner of the state of Georgia. And in fact, the owner of the general store in Bluffton in 1968, there was no life in the town. He just got up, walked out of his general store, locked the door, and never went back. A few years later, because White Oak Pastures has started to grow and become successful, started to employ people, we were able to buy the general store and convert that into not only a general store, but a restaurant, which allows us to take a lot of the products that we make on the farm and cook it for our guests as they come through. So now Bluffton, Georgia is coming back as a direct result of the emphasis on agricultural life and community in this area. We've also become an agritourism spot. We now have 8 cabins that people can rent and just come and stay for the day or the week. They can come in. There's plenty to do at the farm and plenty to see. We have a 24-slip RV park. So people on their way to Florida, that RV park's always full, because people know they can come down their route heading to St. George Island in Florida, and they can get a good meal made by a competent crew of cooks who love what they do, and they're very good at it. And it's the best possible food that we can get for you coming off the farm. There's a lot of benefit to that. Bluffton's coming back because, again, the emphasis on agricultural values and real good, healthily raised food.
And think about this. Bluffton is coming back while the rest of the country is being crushed.
Right.
Now think about how the farming community has been decimated and devastated over the past 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
We had so many small family farms that were not only sustaining for their own families, but they were feeding the families around them.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? When you decentralize food, you decentralize a 50,000 pound beef recall because of some parasite they found in it. No, it doesn't. When one farmer is supplying 250 families around him, if something goes wrong, it affects those 250 families, not the whole nation.
Mm-hmm.
Centralization of food was just a profit grab. That's all this was.
Right.
If we can start to turn to farms like White Oak Pastures, and I happen to know that Will gets visited by other farm owners. We want this way. So they're actually duplicating their success by teaching other people what they do. We need to support those family farms. You know why? Because if this government did something stupid and they shut off the food supply because it's centralized, we would all starve. But if we have all these family farms around us that we're buying from, we can survive. Folks, this is more than just about buying good food. This is about reviving the blood flow in America. It really is. And there is no better place to do this than White Oak Pastures. In fact, I'm looking forward to going home tonight because I know something I'm eating out of my freezer came from White Oak Pastures. If you're listening to this show, I've said this so many times. If this show ever brings you any good information that's impacted your life, reward the show by patronizing the sponsors because they make the show possible. And if you go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code superhuman, you'll pay 15% less on your products that you buy there site-wide. Give them a try. If you've never tried them again, go to the website. I'll tell you the things I love, okay? I love the sausages, first of all. I love the Iberico pork products. Elisa loves the chicken, the skinless and the bone-in chicken breast. The bone-in chicken breast, when you cook them on your grill, you don't have to add any seasoning to them because something about the bone gives it flavor. They have amazing filet mignon, amazing. If you like bratwurst, they have beef bratwurst. If you want a good beef bratwurst, there's so much good stuff there. And there's also products that are made as a result of processing. As I showed you, my wallet. I also use their tallow on my dry feet. They have beautiful tallow that they add like a peppermint or lemon to. You could smear it on your skin if you have dry skin. It's fantastic. shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak, WHITEOAK. Use the code superhuman. Save 15% off. Just give them a try. I'm gonna say like Trump did. Remember when Trump said, "What do you got to lose? You got nothing. You'll have a good piece of meat. You'll have a nice meal." They also have whole chickens that are amazing, and they have an interesting chicken that I started eating because of Will, and that's called a guinea chicken. Chicken. This is not a chicken native to the United States, but you guys are raising them, right?
That's correct.
Where is it native to?
I don't know, and I know it's hunted in several places around the world. As far as its point of origin, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
We've been carrying it for several years. It's a great lean bird with a lot of flavor, and typically one bird can feed up to 2 adults at a time. It's delicious. I love those.
Huge. They're huge. Oh, and by the way, I have 2 frozen rabbits in my deep freeze that I'm going to make Hassenpfeffer one of these days. For
nice.
They have everything you could want. Check them out. Wes, thanks so much for being here today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
And you too.
Hey, it's Friday. We have no show tomorrow, but we do have shows next week. We hope that you can tune in for them. Don't forget, share these shows. Help other people learn. The message that I deliver isn't going to be heard on the mainstream media. I'm never going to be as popular as these other people, but that's okay. That's okay. This is like our own private little club where we focus on the truth about nutrition, science, anti-aging, and health. And so those of us who learn from the guests that we have, our lives improve, and we don't have to prove anything to anybody. You know what? Living long and having a happy life is the best revenge. All right. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being here. Take care.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Most people have heard of phytoestrogens, but did you know there are beneficial phytoandrogens? The top source of these is pine pollen. It even contains trace amounts of testosterone and DHEA. If you're looking for a 100% natural testosterone booster, this is worth trying. Lots of men love it, and it even works for women. Lost Empire Herbs offers the highest quality wild harvested, non-irradiated pine pollen backed by a 365-day money-back guarantee. It works for you, or you don't have to pay for it with nothing to send back. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Lost Empire. Use code SHR. Get 15% off your order today. C60, also known as Buckminster fullerene, is the most powerful, most versatile antioxidant in the world. It's been shown in studies to double the lifespan of rodents. We all know the importance of taking antioxidants to slow aging, reduce inflammation, and improve mitochondrial function and energy production. But there are literally hundreds of antioxidants that would cost you thousands of dollars to take every day. I take one. I take C60 from C360 Health. Revive and Rejuvenate are two blends that harness the power of C60. Don't waste another minute. Go to shrnetwork.biz/revive and use the code SHR for 15% off and free shipping inside the United States today. Plant medicine has become all the rage for mental optimization. Now there's an ancient plant medicine rapidly growing in popularity that experts believe might just be the alcohol of the future. It's called True Kava. Kava is a natural food-grade elixir that has been used for over 3,000 years by South Pacific Islanders as safe, non-addictive alternative to drugs and alcohol. By naturally boosting the brain's main feel-good chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, Kava provides you with both increased relaxation and mental clarity at the same time. True Kava is a new form of stabilized full-spectrum traditional Kava that is third-party lab tested for quality and safety. Go to shrnetwork.biz/True Kava, and that's TRUKAVA, all one word, and use code SHR for 25% off today. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry.